Governor, let's start with the special session that just ended, the lame duck session. There was quite a bit of legislation, including an energy bill that came out of that. Give me your thoughts on the progress that was made during these final couple of weeks here.
Yeah, in fact, they passed over 200 bills, but the premier piece, in my view, is the energy legislation, because that's something I'd called for a special message actually going back 4 years or so, and then the last couple of years we've been working diligently with partners in both the House and the Senate. And what this does is really create a framework for the next few decades. And it's about a combination of things, Rick. It's how to do more reliable energy, more affordable, more environmentally sustainable, but to do it in an adaptable fashion. So there's some flexibility. And the key things you need flexibility on is, one, what does the marketplace do in terms of prices and costs of energy sources? Also recognizing technology is improving. Things like we're finding solar to be more and more competitive. And then the other piece is, what about the federal environment of regulation? The good part is this is Michiganders defining our future rather than waiting for other people to define it for us.
There is a lot of activity during lame duck, and sometimes it's hard to chase it all around. You'll be going through those bills, I think, as your habit as you go through the holidays, and you will get up early in the morning and read them and start reviewing to decide exactly what you're going to do. But one of them that I was really largely unaware of was one that deals with the veterans home system here in the state. And of course, that's something that you focused on, particularly in the Grand Rapids area. We're very familiar with one of the two homes. But if I understand the new legislation, if it gets your signature and goes forward, it would create a third home and really, in fact, completely rebuild the one in Grand Rapids. That's a big change.
Yeah, well, it's actually even more than the construction of homes. It's how to manage it and have better oversight and better transparency. So what we did is again, we've got to do well by our veterans. They deserve it. And we had issues in the Grand Rapids home. We'd already started work on this concept before that happened, but it's how do we look to the long term to say what's best practice for the management and success of veterans homes across the country. And what we found is some states were actually doing this authority model, which really provided kind of a good environment for people to be involved, to have kind of a board oversight model, to still allow us to have some legislative oversight. But it was a combination of those things, and so I'm excited we got that passed.
I want to shift gears to where we are in terms of one of the biggest issues that you dealt with this year in terms of Flint. It was just about 11 months ago that I talked to you just moments before you walked out to give your State of the State. And you were a troubled man. You were unhappy about the situation in Flint. So almost a year later, the federal money has started to flow in the very waning days of the legislature there. How do you feel today versus 11 months ago?
Yeah, well, we've made a lot of progress, but our work isn't done. So I appreciate the question, because it was a terrible tragedy. And again, the people of Flint went through a lot, and they're still suffering in some capacity. But if you look at the water's fundamentally on a path to significant improvement. We saw that in recent results. So there's going to be a big water summit of the experts in mid-January. And I'm looking forward to that meeting and what they conclude out of that, because the progress has been great. But it was also about helping the overall community in many respects. So with respect to education, we've seen big improvements. We put nurses in the schools. We've got additional preschool opportunities for over 400 kids. In terms of nutrition and health care, we've expanded the Medicaid program, Healthy Michigan, a lot in the Flint area in terms of people that were exposed to lead. Double up food bucks, access to food banks in terms of healthy produce and such, which helps not only the lead question, but the overall economic well-being. And then we've created jobs. There's over 800 new jobs in the process of being created in Flint. That's a lot of jobs. So that's all happening, but we have to recognize, how do we make sure we're continuing to bring people along? It's a longer-term recovery cycle on some of these issues, and we're going to follow through. We're going to get this done.
And the federal money that was passed at the end of their legislative session will obviously be of some significance.
Yeah, they finally got something done. Again, it's largely, most of it's in loans. We put over $234 million of grants and assistance and funding in the field, but I appreciate their efforts and their contribution, and it's about all sectors working together. I appreciate what we're doing with the mayor and the city council in Flint, and the nonprofit contributions in terms of both time and resources continue, and I appreciate all those partners.
Without relitigating everything that happened in Flint, it does show that an aging infrastructure in our state, in fact in our country, is an issue. And there has been a study that suggests that in the state of Michigan, we need to be investing significantly more money on an ongoing basis. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you may approach that in your next 2 years?
Yeah, we created the Infrastructure Commission. Actually, I created three: infrastructure, education, and 21st century economy. The Infrastructure Commission report came out recently, and it's a great report. It was a bipartisan effort, very broad-based, great work, and it calls for a large investment, upwards of $4 billion a year as it ramps up. But this is to be done over the next 30 to 50 years. And so what I'd say is near term, there's 2 or 3 steps that I'll be asking for assistance in legislation on. How do we set up a Michigan Infrastructure Council? How do we do some pilots where we manage assets better, these infrastructure assets better? Because think about how often a road may be torn up for road work, but then it may get torn up for water and sewer work, or it may get torn up for gas and electric work, or torn up for broadband. It's like, let's coordinate all that work, because how much money can we save if we do all that work together at once? It can save Michiganders a lot.
When you think of infrastructure, you think of costs, but you also think of jobs. You mentioned jobs in Flint a minute ago. I was looking over some numbers, and the jobs in the state of Michigan today versus 6 years ago is something that you have talked about, but it really is pretty fascinating when you look back when we were really in the depths of it, and we had hundreds of thousands of people who couldn't have jobs and hundreds of thousands of people that were leaving. Where are we today from a job standpoint, from your perspective?
Oh, dramatic improvement. It's exciting with more work to be done, but it's very exciting. Look at West Michigan, look at Grand Rapids, look at Ottawa County. The unemployment rate is 3%, getting down towards 2% in some places. That's incredible. We've created over 480,000 private sector jobs in Michigan since I've been governor. That's number 1 in the Midwest, number 6 in the nation. We're number 1 in manufacturing jobs in the entire country. These are exciting facts. Actually, if you look at our unemployment rate, it has ticked up a little bit, but that's because people are coming back in the labor force. There's now belief that there's employment opportunities. So if you go back to before I was in office, as you said, the last decade, when you talk to somebody, the biggest concern on someone's mind is where is there a job? Does a job exist? Now the question I hear from most people and from employers is, how do people get the training to take the jobs that are open? And so that's where this career connection, career tech education, the skilled trades is my top priority. Has been and will continue to be. And it's about a whole cultural transformation to get people to look at these great careers and hopefully get excited, whether as a young person or a person looking for that second career.
Well, we've spent a lot of time talking about skilled trades.
Yeah.
We talked about them up on Mackinac Island and elsewhere. Is this a program that can be ramped up? I know there's already been work done on it, but quickly enough to really take advantage of that, because each time we sit down, there are multiples of tens of thousands of jobs that are available if people had that training. So how quickly can that all go together?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges. It doesn't ramp up overnight. If you simply think about it, if you have someone that wants to start a program to be in the skilled trades, quite often it's anywhere from a 1-year to a 4-year or 5-year program if you go through all the apprenticeship kind of pieces to it. So it can be several years, but we've gotten that started and those programs are filling up. But one of the things we're doing, Rick, is how to get it back to even middle school kids and younger kids so we can fill that pipeline for the long term, because you can't think short term about this. And you know me, I like to think about not just my term, but what's going to continue on, because that's where it can have the biggest benefit. So there's some great work that I'm already starting to see with middle school kids that we need to expand across more of Michigan.
This was an interesting year on any number of levels. And as politicians go, and forgive me for saying politician, but after 6 years you have to wear the moniker, I think. You definitely avoided the presidential contest because you said early on you were going to concentrate on House races,
Yeah.
which you did. Not only did you and your associates raise money, you were out personally doing some campaigning, but that's all over now, and now there's a new president of the United States. How does Governor Rick Snyder interface with President Donald Trump?
Well, hopefully well. Again, we did well in all those House races. We maintained a strong majority in the House of Representatives at the state level. But the way I view it is, regardless of who would win, I want a great relationship with Washington, with the president, and I think it's going to be exciting with Donald Trump. You can see that already, so I appreciate his victory. And we want to build good ties, because the last thing the citizens of Michigan want to see is me spending time fighting with another level of government. I wasn't hired to fight or blame people. My philosophy is relentless positive action. How do we work together? And my goal is, how can I be the best partner, whether it's local government or federal government or other third parties, on delivering the best services to you?
There will be some big Michigan connections if the cabinet appointees go through in the way that we think they will. Betsy DeVos would become the Secretary of Education, and Ronna Romney McDaniel will be heading up the Republican National Committee. What does that do for positioning for Michigan? I mean, starting with Betsy DeVos, who has been involved in education in this state for a long time.
Yeah, well, I view those all as great positives. The more Michiganders going to Washington to help, the better. In many respects, if you look at their role is to think nationally. So it's not just about Michigan, but it helps having someone have that Michigan background, the Michigan context. The other thing is hopefully they can take some of the Michigan lessons learned, because we've been an innovator. We've been reinventing government here in Michigan, and those can help the federal government, and it's a great way to promote Michigan.
You've got 2 years left. I've got 2 minutes left. So let's take a look going forward. Obviously, you're interested in education. You've said there's more work to be done in Flint. There are things that you want to achieve. But if you had to give a top 3 right now, what are those 3 things that we may hear about in a few weeks for State of the State?
Yeah, well, I'd come back to, we talked about career counseling and career connection and this career tech education. That's going to remain a top priority. Infrastructure, like we talked about. Including some improvements there, this asset management concept, but also the lead and copper rule. That's specifically a Flint one that we need to work on. So those are 2 key ones I would put right out in front of you that you're going to hear right after the first of the year.
All right, Governor, as always, thank you for your time.
It's great to be with you.